Want to make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it anywhere and everywhere. You can even earn money all in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works.
Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you can start creating today.
Then you can go ahead and distribute your podcast to Spotify and anywhere else podcasts are heard.
Video podcasts are also available on Spotify. And when you want to take the conversation with your fans to the next level, Q&A polls are the best way to get them talking.
With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions.
And best of all, it's totally free with no catch. We've been using Spotify for Podcasters, and we highly recommend you give it a try. Download Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters and get started.
All right, everybody, welcome back to That's So Fringy podcast. I'm here with my daughter, Addison, who has agreed to come on. Say hello to everybody, Addison.
Hello.
And we wanted to put out this Fringy Morsel this week, but my daughter was in town. And so I thought it would be cool because her and I have been bantering back and forth for a very long time now about the flat earth, mostly in fun. But there is a little bit of... daughter thinks her dad's a bit of a whack job when it comes to the flat earth. So, what do you got, man? You got some questions about the flat earth? So I figured that we would just talk a little bit about, your questions that you might have about the flat earth, because we already did an episode about the flat earth with Flat Earth Dave, and it's got a lot of play. A lot of people liked that episode. And so we just wanted to do another just quick one because it just was convenient, you being in town. So What's something that has always kind of bothered you about the flat earth thing?
Well, it doesn't make any sense that one planet in the solar system would be flat.
Yeah. Well, that's a good one because, and if I may, the problem with that logic is a lot of people that are flat earthers is they don't actually believe that the Earth is a solar system. It's part of a solar system, and that all of the other planets are out in space doing all that they're doing. So that model that you've seen of the sun, flying at a really high rate of speed, and then you've got all of the planets going around it, and then the moon's going around that. So that whole model is the heliocentric model. That's the globe model. If we were to break that down to what the flat earthers really believe, they believe that the earth is the center of everything.
Right. And I've heard that before.
And it's stationary and it doesn't move. And everything that you see going around in the sky is what's moving. So instead of it being a central earth and central sun and everything going around that, it's actually a central earth and everything's going around that. So, good question, though. What else you got?
Well, I guess, why would everybody on Earth, like all scientists on Earth, because it's not just the U.S. government, like anyone has access to the internet, why everybody on Earth, every scientist on Earth, why has nobody been like, how has nobody released a picture of the flat Earth before? Because if you Google flat earth pictures, they're all fake.
Right. Yeah. And if you Google pictures of the earth, a lot of times you're going to find fake pictures of the earth too. And that's the hard part that a lot of flat earthers have is if you can go to space, if you have been to space, why didn't you just turn around and take a picture of the earth? Well, they say that the satellites are going around taking pictures of the earth all the time, but then when you actually see those pictures, you see like cloud clusters where you'll have like a cloud cluster over here and then you'll have another cloud cluster over here and they'll be the exact same. So it was photoshopped. And it's not just one occurrence. It's like multiple occurrences where you have like a cloud here and a cloud there and a cloud here and a cloud there. It's really difficult to get a real actual picture of whether it's round or if it's flat.
Well, and I've seen TikTok videos of people at the space station videoing the Earth and it's round.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's a lot of that where you see people in the space station, you know, they're floating around, they're doing their backflips, they're doing spacewalks, all of that. I think a lot of flat earthers would argue in that regard that that they're doing a lot of that spacewalking and everything in water, and they actually are doing it, filming it in like a pool, because a lot have shown that they have bubbles going up. So that's something to look at. And then I know a lot of flat earthers are also really interested in the spacewalking and people in the space station, because they tell us that that's up there, right? And so we pay a lot of attention to what NASA's doing. And a lot of people have found that there's a lot of CGI going on. There's a lot of mistakes that are made when it comes to the space station. So as a flat earther, they don't believe that the space station is actually out in outer space.
Right.
They believe it's in very high altitude.
Well, and I've heard
flight.
that too, that some people think there's Mars, like everything they capture about Mars is actually someplace on Earth. And same thing with like the moon landing. There's a lot of conspiracies and there's a lot of conspiracies about the moon landing being fake or real. And I don't really go into a whole bunch of that, but
I mean, it's interesting. You know, when you think about the Earth and what we really know about it, we have to really break that down and say, okay, who's telling us this information? And that's where I've always been kind of a rebel and been like, I want to know where this came from. You know, how do you know that we have 9 planets? How do you know that the solar system moves like that? How do you know? And so if you really go into the research and find that there's actually documented scientific tests that they've done to show how the sun moves and everything like that. The problem is none of the math adds up, because the experiments that they did doesn't actually prove a round Earth. All that it's proving is that you have a sun that's moving above us. And they say that it's because we're spinning away from it. And so all of these questions begin to come up. And my biggest thing is just ask yourself, and I'm not telling anybody to be a flat earther or a heliocentric model believer. I think you have to have faith in both of them. You know, it's kind of like a religion almost, because you do have to have faith. When you say, I've never been to the moon, you know, you've never been to the moon. And so we don't know what type of Earth we're living on, because we've never done that. And so at one point you have to come to the place where you say, okay, I have to have faith in either the heliocentric model, which is the approved scientific method at this point, or you have to say, I believe in the flat Earth. And I think that's kind of where it's coming down to in the world, is people are starting to just choose. They're just deciding to have more faith in the flat Earth than in the globe, or vice versa. And then you get people fighting about it, which I think is weird. You know, like, why do we have to fight about it? Why can't we just talk about it like you and I are now? We've always had a good enough relationship where we can just laugh at each other. Like, I'll send you a picture of the Earth on the back of a turtle and just be like, this is the flat Earth, you know, even though I don't believe that, or just joking. Like, I feel like people should be able to have conversations, and it's really hard to do nowadays. So when it comes to the globe model, when you start looking at the things like the curvature of the Earth and using their numbers to do the mathematical equations for how much curvature there would be in a mile, we'll say, there's supposed to be 8 inches of drop per I think it's per mile or something like that. That's when you take the circumference of the earth and you break down how much it would be with the curvature, you do all that math, that's what you find. And so if you have those known numbers, then you can calculate how much drop you'll have at a certain distance just by using that formula. And so people have done that. They've gone out and they've gone across, looked across lakes and stuff like that, that they, with a known distance of the lake, you can surmise that that's how much curvature or how much drop the lake should have. And you don't see that with your own eyes. And so the math works when you use those numbers, but it doesn't match your eyes. Your eyes visually don't see that drop, that curvature.
Right. If we're talking about drops, though, you know how you can stand on like a shore and you can watch a boat go into the distance. Mm-hmm. How do you explain you not being able to see it and it like sinking down? You can't see the bottom of the boat for a while, then you can only see the sails, and then you just can't see it anymore. If the earth wasn't curved, how would that be possible?
Well, there's some people that have experiments with that, because that's a very common question where a lot of people ask, how is that possible? Because that's a phenomena that we all experience, whether you're a flat earther or a glober, that's what you see. And so then you have to say, well, what are we dealing with there? And it really comes down to perspective. If you look down a long hallway and you see all of the lights, like if you're staying at a hotel and you had all the lights going down the hallway, you would see them converge into each other, where they would kind of come to a point at the end. And then the top of the ceiling and the floor would actually converge at a certain point of your eyesight too. That's called perspective. Everything kind of goes into one point. Your eyes can only see so far. And so what's really happening there, and people have done experiments with this, is it's going out of your eyesight, what the limit of your eyes, and it's getting smaller and smaller as it gets away, because that's the perspective that your eyes do. You go into a cone. And so what they've done is they've taken the camera and they've went until it's gone away, like your normal eyes. And then they will zoom in and the ship comes back and it becomes bigger and they can see it again. And then they wait until it goes away again, and then they'll zoom in again and it'll be back there again. So it's really not a matter of the ship going over the edge. It's a matter of it going further and further away and your eyes not being able to compensate enough for that, if that makes sense. And then you have to take into account the atmospheric stuff that happens, because like on when the sun's going down, you start to see, especially like on a hot day, you'll see like waves and stuff like that. Like our atmosphere has matter to it. It has substance. And so that kind of gets in the way of your sight too, because there's really 3 levels of atmosphere, and it begins to go to the point where you can't see it anymore. Physically, because it's too far, it gets really, really small because of perspective. And because it's so far away, it can also be covered by the atmospheric covering way out far like that. So that's not the answer, but I think that's what a flat earther would say is scientifically they've looked into that type of stuff. And so that's why I think it's interesting when people just get mad and don't want to talk like we're talking now, because it's like there's been a lot of experiments done. There's been a lot of people that have, used lasers and balloons and all kinds of things to try to prove the flat earth. They're doing scientific experiments and they're trying to actually prove the heliocentric model, but they can't, because they get to a certain point where they realize that it's just like the science doesn't make any sense. And so we continue to go back and forth until everybody gets enough knowledge or information. And that's why I don't really push it on anybody. I basically say, just look into it, with an open mind. And if you find that it's flat, then great. If you find that it's a globe, then great. It's really not one of those things where you have to become angry at each other. You know what I mean? When Kristen and I first started talking about this, Kristen was like, what does it even matter? And to a point, it doesn't matter at all. But there is a point of it for me personally where I read more, and this is just me because I believe in the Bible. I read more of a flat earth in the Bible than I do a globe earth, because the descriptions of the earth in the Bible is that there's a firmament or a dome-like shield over the top of the earth, and it's flat, it's on a foundation, and there's an underworld or an underneath, and then there's the earth, and then there's the oceans, and then there's its fixed borders. Those are all the things that the Bible talks about. So when you see that, then you're like, okay, so is God true and in the Bible true, or is science true? And that's where I go back to religion. Like, it becomes a religion at that point. You have to have faith, because you can't get in I can't get in a rocket and just go find out myself.
Right.
So I could try.
Right. So do a lot of like flat earthers think that nobody's ever been to space?
Yes. So there's a lot of flat earthers that say that we've never been to the moon. And a big part of that is because of how NASA has acted about it. So it's been kind of sketchy. Not nobody, but a lot of people didn't really believe the moon landing, which all the conspiracy theory
and I
came
can
from.
understand the moon landing because it was the space race. So I can understand them faking that.
Sure.
But you're going to tell me, I don't know when the moon landing was, but years later, that we still haven't figured out a way to get to none of the planets on Earth have figured out a way, or none of the countries on Earth have figured out a way to get to the moon or to space in general. Yeah.
And that's the thing that's fishy, is because if there is a dome, so we'll just assume for a second that the Bible's true and that the earth is flat and that there is a dome, that would mean that you physically can't get through it. And if the moon isn't a rock in the sky, which most flat earthers believe it's actually a ball of plasma or a ball of energy of some sort, and not actually something that you can land on. And there's a lot of interviews of really old scientists back in the day that have said, you can't land on the moon. It's plasma. Like, there's no way. And some of the astronauts have slipped up a little bit and said, oh, we never went to the moon, those type of things. And those are the things that people jump on, and they say, okay, but I like your reasoning better. For me is like, okay, let's just assume that we did go. Why don't we do it again? Like, why don't we just put this to bed? Let's just put this to rest and say, let's send people up there again and we'll do it again. And now everybody can just shut up. But they don't do that.
I know, that's my biggest thing. Is like, okay, well, when I talk about the moon landing, it's like, okay, well, let's say that they didn't go. They can probably figure out a way to get there now. And if they can't, why? Yeah. Why can't we go? Because we should have the technology to do so. Right. Like, it makes sense. You have people studying this, and you should be able to go, especially if you're talking about having a space station up there. We should be able to make it, like, all 7 billion people in the world. Nobody could figure out a way. No couple people could come together and figure out a way to send a rocket into space. You
think they could, but they're not doing that. And then when like a NASA astronaut was asked, why don't we go back to the moon? And they're like, well, we lost all that technology, or we lost all the tapes and all the information that we had to do it. And you're like, what are you talking about? First of all, what do you mean you lost the most historic tapes and documentation that the world should never lose? Because I mean, you got to the moon and you just were like,
well, and not only that, you figured it out once. You can't do it again with the technology and knowledge that we have now. You can't. You wouldn't be able to figure that out again. Like, are you kidding?
Yeah. And then you start looking into like the operations that the CIA has done and other government programs, like Operation High Jump, which is where they went to the ice wall, which is the flat Earth people believe that there's an ice shelf that is the border.
Right. Keeps people on.
Yeah.
They don't fall off.
And so back in I believe it was 40s, they went to the ice wall, and it was Operation High Jump because these walls are really high. They actually had to go up on them, and then they were flying to just kind of see what was down there. Admiral Byrd was down there. If you guys want to look him up, he's got a lot of information on what he saw and the things that he found when he was down there. It's pretty prevalent on the internet now. It didn't used to be, but Admiral Byrd comes back with a lot of information. So that was Operation High Jump. And then they did Operation Fishbowl, which is another very interesting title for a mission.
Right.
And that was them. A lot of the flat earthers believe that they found the dome. They found like where the dome is, and it might be in Antarctica or part of the ice wall. And so they were studying the fishbowl, Operation Fishbowl. They were studying that. And then there was, what was the operation where they were nuking? So there's another operation where a lot of flat earthers believe that they were sending nuclear weapons up into the dome to try to break through it. And after they did that for a while, that's when they came out with NASA and then the moon landing and all of these things like started happening. And if you put all that into perspective and you say, okay, you're walking down this path of, okay, they just proved that the ice wall exists. And then they just proved that the fishbowl exists. And then they tried to nuke it to see if they could get past it, and they couldn't. And so now they create NASA and start the lie of trying to keep this from everybody. And that really leads everybody down the path to why.
I was just going to say, I guess, what's the purpose of hiding that? I feel like it's such a little thing that shouldn't be lied about. I mean, I know the government lies about a lot of unnecessary things, but why the shape of the earth?
Yeah. And that's where it gets kind of squirrely, because people are like, what's the big deal? Why would they lie to us about this?
Well, and I guess that comes back to that second question I asked you with why does every scientist... There's no way every single scientist on the whole world is keeping this secret collectively when not everybody works for NASA.
No, I agree. I think a lot of it comes down to compartmentalization. And there's, if you can compartmentalize workers to where they can't talk to each other about their job. So like if you're working on a very secretive classified project and I'm working on a very secretive classified project, and it's in our contracts and we sign a non-disclosure agreement and all that stuff where you can't talk about your work and I can't talk about my work, even with each other, then it would be easier. And they do that. They compartmentalize things to where people don't really know the full story because they're not, quote unquote, read into the secret project that's going on. And so if you can compartmentalize it like that, then and I heard, I don't know how true it is, but I heard that they told the astronauts that supposedly went to the moon that they were going to film it as a kind of a backup to have in case they lost communications and all these different things. And so the astronauts went along with the filming of it and everything. And they were just like, yeah, that's a good idea, because you never know. And then that's the footage that they actually put out for the moon landing, was this fake stuff. I mean, when you see the president of the United States pick up a rotary dial phone from his desk and you're telling me he's talking to the moon from a rotary dial phone, like, we know how that technology works now. Like, we're smart enough to figure it out. Whereas back then people didn't understand how phones and TVs and all that stuff worked. Well, we have the internet. Like, we can Google it. And if I Google the rotary phone, I guarantee you it's not going to be able to talk to Mars. It doesn't matter what you do with it. And so those are like the things that a lot of flat earthers are like, okay, these are questions. These are very interesting things that kind of pop up over time. And if you can compartmentalize people and keep everybody in their own departments and can't talk about it, sign this non-disclosure agreements type of thing, you could do it, I think. I think you could keep it, if you had a scientist working on this thing and another one working on this thing and they didn't know, I think you can trick a lot of people pretty easily.
I think a lot of people are gullible, but...
But I get the point. I mean, it would be difficult to lie to everybody. And I think that's the problem that they're having now with the internet. Is
if you even just think about COVID, there was so many people who thought the government was lying to them, that it was a fake thing. And then there were so many people who were like, the government's lying to you. And then there was people that were like, I'm going to die if I get this sickness.
Yeah. there was so many different levels. You know, you had
Right.
completely crazy to completely crazy in the other direction, where they're
Right.
like, I will not wear a mask. I will not get. And so you have to kind of like, it's all, you step back from it. Hopefully every individual could do that and step back from it and say, okay, what are they trying to do here?
Right.
Like, what's the real purpose of this?
Mhm.
Because they're pushing it really hard. You know, and that's kind of the same thing with space to me, is I feel like they're always pushing space
Right.
and aliens.
I definitely,
and all that stuff.
I think there's something fishy going on with them in space. I do believe that. But just, I mean, I can understand not telling us if there's aliens. I can understand faking the moon landing. I can't understand why they would hide the shape of the Earth.
Yeah. My personal opinion is they're trying to hide God. They're trying to make God hard to relate to. So if you tell everybody that we live in a universe on a rock that's just flying through space, you're not really important. You know what I mean? It doesn't make you feel very important. It makes you feel like one of millions of other probably aliens and different things out there. But if the reality truly was that we lived on a flat earth and that it was created by God and that there was a dome and we couldn't leave, like, that changes things a little bit.
Right.
Because if there is a God, that really changes how people live their lives. Because they would take the Bible a little more seriously. But if you can leave it ambiguous, if you could make it distorted, the truth, to where it's really hard to find, then people kind of get tired of looking because it's too much work. You know what I mean? It's a lot of work to figure out the truth when somebody is intentionally, or multiple people are intentionally blurring the lines. You know, you're constantly chasing the truth. And after a while, I think a lot of people are just like, this is too much. Like, this is a lot of research. This is a lot of information. Then you're just like, and then the ridicule that comes with it. You know, if you tell somebody you're a flat earther, they just like lose their mind.
They do. They lose their mind.
They just,
I lost
like,
my mind.
Yeah, they're just like, I can't even believe that a human being would even think that. And you're just like, whoa.
But I mean, I get it with how the school system, I mean, there's a lot of things wrong with our school system. And so I could understand why, like, telling everyone, you're teaching everybody that the earth is round. And I can understand why they would blow up, just because it's like, well, that's what we were taught in school. Yeah. But we were also taught shit that doesn't matter in school.
Yeah, you're telling me that the whole education system is designed to lie to me? Like, that's a really big pill to swallow, you know? But then if you dissect it and you really look at it and you think about the people that have, like, started the school system, like, most people don't even look into that. Like, how did the school system even get started? Who was it that started? And then you find out it was John D. Rockefeller, and he was a psychopath. And that there's all of these quotes of him saying that he just wants workers. He basically just wants slaves. He doesn't want people to think. And then you look at our school system and how it's just pumping out workers.
Yeah,
you know?
well, and just look at how, like, what they're teaching you in school. Why do I need to know? Why is it required for me to take, like, calculus? I've never used that before outside of school. Or, like, I can understand English, having to take that full time, but I learned no skills to live. I don't know how to pay bills. I don't know how to look for a house. I don't know how to find a job. I mean, I do know how to do that, but like, how, they don't teach you how to get an interview. They don't teach you how to manage your money. They don't teach you anything that's actually important after you get out of high school. Right.
And then you leave feeling like, okay, well, I did this 12 years that you asked me to do, but I feel unprepared for the world now, you know, and
well, because not everyone's choice is to go to college. And I understand having those classes like calculus and algebra and stuff for if you choose to go to college, take those in high school so that you're ready for those higher math classes. But it shouldn't be a requirement. It shouldn't be a requirement to take those.
Yeah, no, I agree. I guess my biggest message on this podcast and for you and all of my children is to just think for yourself. You know, just look into things. Don't just take what, you know, I always say, don't just take what the box on the wall is telling you. as truth. Don't, there used to be a saying that said, don't believe everything that you read. Well, now
it's the
don't
TV.
believe everything that you see. Don't believe everything that's on TikTok. Don't, look into it, do your own research, be your own person. You
can't trust every site too, because yes, a news site can release information, but where did they get that information? And a lot of news stations do lie to you.
Yeah.
So why you can't just check one source. You got to check this source and this source and this source, and what information is actually matching up with the other ones.
Yeah.
And you can't look at one side either. You have to look at contradicting ones as well, because you're not going to know if you just follow one side.
Yeah. And that's a problem I have with like a lot of Christianity and other type of ideologies, is that people are so like, I can't read the Quran because I might, slip and fall and accidentally become a Mormon or a Muslim. I mean, it's like, what? You're just reading it for information. We're not talking about conversion here,
Right.
Like there's things that you can look into, and you're not, it's not a cootie, it's not going to rub off on you and
Right.
you become something. So I think it's our duty to look into other religions. It's our duty to look into history and question it. It's our duty to look into space and question NASA. I mean, they've got a really big budget, $64 billion a year.
I think that's important to think for younger kids, for young adults, for like politics too, is that you can't just take whatever you hear. You have to look at both sides, because if you only look at one, obviously it's going to be biased.
Sure.
And all that you're looking for is going to be on that side. So you have to look at the opposing side and be like, okay, which one to me makes more sense, seems more logical? What do I believe in more? What do what are they doing about this issue that I like better? And I think that's what a lot of people don't do. And they're just like, oh, well, this is what I believe in, so I'm going to do this. And I don't care what the internet says.
Yeah. Or they'll just like pick, whatever party that their parents had, it's like they don't do any of their own research.
Right.
They send out a big old pamphlet for voting and people just don't read them because it's like, and my generation got really disillusioned with voting because it didn't seem like it was doing anything. Like you would vote and nothing would change. It was like the same old thing. So a lot of people in my generation just stopped voting because we were like, that's why they had to have these big get out and vote campaigns, because we were just like, this is dumb. This doesn't mean anything. And so it's good for your generation and those to follow you to know the Constitution, to know the Bill of Rights, to understand what our country was founded on and the morals and standards that the founders set forth, because it was all good stuff. Like it was all about freedom and leave us alone.
There's a reason you can't change the Constitution.
Yeah. I mean, that's our founding documents. And the problem is a lot of the government that we have in right now isn't following the Constitution. They're just not doing it. And it's up to we, the people, to stand up and say, we're educated enough to know that you are not following the rules, and now we're done with you. And I think that's what's happening right now. A lot of people are waking up to that fact. But anyway, good conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on to the podcast.
Of course.
I love you.
I love you.
All right. That's it for us. We're going to get out of here for this Fringy Morsel. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, all those things. And be very sure to write a review, because we want to know what you're thinking about all of these episodes and how you're receiving it, and it really helps with the algorithm. So all of that said, we'll see you on the next one. Bye.